So a telephone repairman's working on a local church, and there's 3 ministers there gathered for lunch, and they start one-upping each other, and one minister says to the other, he says, well, what do you think about praying? He said, I know for me the best way in the world to pray is to have my hands together and kind of look up. The other minister said, that doesn't really work for me at all. He says, well, what works for me is I actually get down on my knees and I pray and I know my prayers are heard. And the other minister said, that's not it for me. He says, well, what I do is I know that all my prayers are answered when I'm lying flat on my back. So the telephone repairman, he had kind of heard enough of all their comparison. He said, well, I'll tell you what. My best prayer came when I was dangling from a telephone pole about 40 feet in the air by a cord. And he said, that was my best prayer. Let me tell you, I prayed. That's what I'm talking about. So, I know, right? Wow. So when we're thinking about living our lives, going through the season, one of the greatest tools that we can have in our toolbox, in our toolkit, is the understanding of what prayer is. The title today is, Why Are We So Grateful? And the reason is because in unity, we have a direct connection to the divine. We don't need to go somewhere to get it. We don't need to have to be somewhere else to find it. We don't have to be with someone more credentialed than we are to experience it. We have a direct link with the divine. Now, we don't have to wait until we're dangling off a telephone pole. I've got some stories that would almost match that, but that is not our talk today. We do not need to wait until we have the emergency that has our name on it. It's the understanding that we can pray in the divine every day, whether it's sitting at the traffic light waiting, whether it's in the shower, whether it's before breakfast. There's all different kind of ways to work in the ability to say, divine life through me. May I recognize the oneness everywhere I am today. May I not just sing about being oneness, may I know the oneness. May I have this exchange. May I pray and may I call in heaven on earth. That's what Jesus said, yes? When they said, how do you do all you do? I mean, all these miracles. How do you do it? I'm wondering, how do you do it? And he said, you have to understand how to pray. It's our Father who art in heaven. Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. It doesn't say to some people the kingdom will come. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, how? On earth as it is in heaven. On earth, like right now. Like this is our time. We are not the delayed organization that believes our time comes after we have died. We believe our time is coming to our ability to live right now. And to bring in that evolution and that consciousness of bringing more of the Spirit within, in everything. Every time we look over the news, every time we're in a conversation that's immersed with negativity, we are praying inside for something that is a greater reality and a greater truth that we know always works. But you see, for many, the understanding is to understand that this divine power is yours, and you are it. Many of us were raised that we fall short. Many of us were told God doesn't want to listen to you, you're drinking too much, you're addicted, you have relationship issues, you don't have enough money in the bank. Why does God want to listen to you? We were taught about an outside God. We were taught about a God that we could not reach. We were talking about a God that we would never be good enough to even be heard by, you see. And the reason is so we could be controlled by other things. It's so we can be controlled when we're vulnerable. It's so people can tell us what to do when we feel weak. It's so we feel like we don't have the answers when we're financially in difficulty. But when we understand the law according to the Christ consciousness of God, and we know who we are, we will never be controlled by another thing except the excitement of what is going to reveal itself in the course of this day right now. Are you with me? Are you with me? This is the very place in which we live and move and have our being. Is this truth of understanding we are not here to spend our lives to get a relationship with the divine. We're here to know that we are the divine and the relationship is already in place. It is already done. It is already manifested. And so that's the space, the dimension that we come from when we are in that level of prayer, as it says in Mark 3, 1 through 21. For those of you that love delving into the stories, I love stories, I love reading the Bible, but I'm more interested in how the story applies to me right now. How can I work with the story right now? How can it value me right now in this 2017, November 17th day? Yes? But it says very clearly, Nicodemus said, you know, Jesus, I can tell that you're tuned into something. I don't think the rest of us are. You know, what is that? And he said, verily I say unto you, you must be born again. You must be born again to really experience the kingdom of God. What was he talking about? Because Nicodemus was like, what do you mean? Look how big I am. I'm going to be born from my mother again? How am I going to do that? And he goes, well, of course not. You know, of course not. You're going to be born again in the Spirit. And that is what we do here every week. That is why we come here. That's why we do classes. That's why we feature great musicians. That's why we come together with whatever stories we have told ourselves so we can unite in a greater understanding that we are born of the Spirit. And all the limitations that we have told ourselves, what our parents told us, what our school teachers told us, what our doctors told us, what the people told us, what the weather tells us, all of those things can eliminate themselves in a greater way when we step into a place that we are born of the Spirit. And we step into that intelligence of who we are. Does that connect with you? Is that making sense at all? I love Sir Francis Bacon, some of his writings. I love this. There is a poem called A Prayer for the Future. Disturb us, Lord, when we are too well pleased with ourselves, when our dreams have come true because we have dreamed too little, when we arrive safely because we have sailed too close to the shore. Disturb us, Lord, when with the abundance of things we possess, we have lost our thirst for the waters of life. Having fallen in love with life, we have ceased to dream of eternity. And in our efforts to build a new earth, we have allowed our vision of the new heaven to dim and disturb us. Disturb us, Lord, to dare more boldly, to venture on wider seas where storms will show your mastery, where losing sight of land, we shall find the stars. We ask you to push back the horizons of our hopes and to push into the future in strength and courage and hope and in love. Herbert Jackson tells a story of when he was a missionary on his new assignment that he went to this place and they told him, well, here's your car, but it's a push start. You're going to have to push it to get it to crank. And so he said, okay. So he got wise enough. He got a bunch of local kids to help him. And every morning when he'd need to crank the car, he would push it, push, and then it would crank. And often when he would go in for an appointment, he'd leave the car running, or he'd park it so he could drive down a hill and get it to crank again. So he did this for a couple of years, and a new missionary came. And he couldn't wait to tell him about the car and how he was able to master and come up with all these techniques and how to keep this car running that would not start on his own. So the new missionary is telling him the story, and no sooner than he was even complaining and telling him what he had to do about it, the guy looked up into the hood and he said, oh, Mr. Ferguson, I already found what it is. He said, you got a loose cable. So he connects the cable, and there you go, and the car just starts right up. just started right up. And he thought to himself, here I am. I've spent 2 years working around the trouble when all I had was a loose connection. I wait long enough, somebody's going to start telling. It's the connection that we have. It's our greatest gift, that we are connected to something that is infinite, that we are connected to something that is endless, that we are connected to something that there's no differentiation between heaven and earth. It's the claiming that space, wherever you are today, with whatever condition that you have, realize the power has always been on. The car has always been running. It's like the person that said, God built the garage, but you got to pull your car in it, right? And so wherever you are, with whatever space you are holding, recognize that all one needs to do is reinforce the connection. Because prayer doesn't change God, it changes us. To greet the day, and to say, here I am. Here I am to make the connection for Mother Earth. Here I am to make the connection for all living things. Here I am, a life force, that I am bringing a healing and a revealing to humanity. That is my path. That is what I am here for. You see, so many people spend their lives focusing on what they are, rather than who they are. Can you see the difference? It's a big difference, and that is the most excitement about the ability to create these everyday miracles in our lives, is when we really get to a place of stepping in to who we are. It's so exciting, because then you're able to see what Spirit can do through you that you had no idea that you could do for yourself. But it's not a begging and a pleading. It's not a bargaining and, oh dear God, please help me with this, and I'll do 6 new things for you next week. It doesn't look like that. It's an affirmative prayer. It's a creation of allowing the divine to flow through you in your words and in the way you live and in the way that you are. And you walk away from that space that you just created about yourself. Because that's something that you have bought into. But in this new space is the ability to be born new right now, to let that go. And so you want to ask yourself, with the stories that you've been telling, how is it serving you? And what is the payoff from the story? And what would happen if you were willing to let it go? Would you be willing to let it go? I want you to join me, because I want to step into this space of being absolutely, with no conditions, who I am and what I came here to be. And are you ready for that? Are you ready for that as well? Are you ready to stand for yourself and to get excited about your life and to see yourself exceed these conditions, so people can no longer tell you what to do or how to do or when to do, but you can be that electric field of knowing the truth within your own being, that God through you, that you decide, that you are filled with that energy, and nothing imposed upon you you will accept unless you decide that you want to. Wow. I was prepared during the summer to go tell one of my beloved teachers, a person that had changed my life. I was there, going there to tell her goodbye. And how do you say goodbye on the physical plane to someone who has brought you so much to who you are? So I prayed for courage and for strength, and that I might carry a field for her of understanding, that I knew that life would not be ending for us, that we would connect on many different levels. But I was going over there at the end of the week to tell her that it looked very clear, and to have a conversation with her that she was going to need to go to hospice. And I kept having this prayer. I see it and I know it. I know it's going to unfold, and it's in God's grace, and I just hold that. So on Wednesday night, I have a dream. And in the dream, I see a gurney that they have placed my friend on. And she's looking back. It's like this hospice van, and she's looking back, and her eyes were so big and so sad and so weary. And I woke up from the dream, and I went, this is not going to happen. This is not what is supposed to happen. Do you understand that? You look at those situations in your life and you declare, this is not what's supposed to happen. And so I went into the holding of the truth, and I said, it is absolutely the way it's supposed to be for her, the way she wants it. And I called her caregiver. I said, I'm on my way. I'll be there in a few minutes. And I could hear a little disruption in the background. And they said, what? Temple, she's already gone. She's already gone. So I said, I'll be over. I'm on my way. I go over, I sitting Shiva, holding space, holding that consciousness. I invite other people in. I called for the crematory to come and get her. Here comes the gurney. I said to the gentleman, I said, can I help place her on it? Can I help carry my friend on the gurney? And my other friend looked at me, Camille, and said, how are you able to do that? I said, because I was gifted a dream. And in that dream, I saw what was not to be, so I could live in a place of what can be. Do you get that about our lives? It's so we can have the bigger picture of what can be if we will be in the space and allow ourselves to be connected with the divine. In Chicken Soup for the Soul, everybody knows that book, right? All right, I know. Anyway, Chicken Soup for the Soul, there's a story about, in 1957, there was a monastery that was relocating, and they needed to bring their big Buddha. They had a big clay statue of a Buddha, and it was 2 tons, 10 foot, huge. So the crane was maneuvering to move it. When it does, it cracks through the clay, and the head monk there, he was trying to see what it was, and he said, I'll come back at dark. So at dark, he comes back with his flashlight, and there's this glow inside there. And he looks, and they just couldn't believe it. Underneath the clay was a gold Buddha. A gold Buddha that many hundreds of years ago, the monks had protected from the Burmese army when they were attacking Thailand. And many of the monks lost their lives back then, but they protected the Buddha itself. That's what our job is. That's what we're doing. We're cracking away the clay that we have put and placed upon ourselves, so that we may unveil that beautiful Buddha, that Christ light, that knowing of who we are, the golden essence of who we are meant to be. It is who we are, not what we are, that allows the divine to express so freely through us. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.